All right, so we're going to edit this photo of the downed tree in the canal. First thing I'm going to do, I typically do, is turn on auto, and that sets some basic adjustments. In looking at this image, it's very blue, and I'd like to at least see what happens if I change my white balance. So I've gone over to color. Up here you can see white balance. White balance deals with the way your camera is interpreting light. So when I tap on as shot, we have lots of options here, and you can see little previews of how it would change things. I shot this in the daylight. It was a sunny day, so I'm going to tap on daylight. Okay, now let's see if there's much of a difference. If you ever want to see the before and after, tap and hold on your image, and it'll show you before and then after the adjustments. Okay, so it does make a bit of a difference. But in looking at this image, I don't think color is doing a whole lot. It's very blue and it's very brown. And I'm curious to see what happens if we change that into something that is more monochromatic. So let's tap on the B and W option. That's going to change my image into a black and white photo. Okay, so again, we can kind of go back and forth. I don't really think it loses anything. I kind of like the blue that's down in the water, but I think we can play with our settings here a bit to get the black and white to work really nicely as well. While I'm in my black and white, now that I've changed it to black and white, I'm going to go to Profiles, and I can check on these different black and white profiles. A profile is kind of like a foundation that you can build upon. And again, it doesn't make any permanent changes, but it just it kind of interprets the photo in different ways. So you can see as I go through these various profiles, we're seeing some really distinct changes. I like this number 12 because it gives me some content in the sky, whereas when I come back here to like number 1, the sky gets a little lost. Okay, it's there, but it's and then on number 5 it gets really too present, too gray. Okay, so I think I'm going to try to work with number 12. The only way you learn this stuff is by trying them out. Now that I've set my profile, before I go back and do any sort of adjustments, I'm going to take a look at my presets. Okay, so for preset, we can choose between all of the different presets that are offered here, or if I've saved some presets from some other editors, or maybe some presets that I've created, I can select them there as well. I'm going to go to black and white. And again, just by tapping through these and watching how my image changes, I can see if something is more appealing than another. All right, so we've just kind of worked our way through them. I don't really like to go with the sepia tone or the split tone because they just feel a little too forced, a little gimmicky. But let's come back up here to landscape. I like what the landscape is doing down in the water area. I'm a fan of the high contrast and punch, and I think punch might be kind of where I want to go, but it's a little strong right now. Landscape maintains a lot of my sky tone in the detail in the tree, but high contrast brings out a lot of the information in the water and a lot of those shadows. Okay, but I'm going to stick with landscape, knowing that I can still come in here and make adjustments. So let's come back over to light. When I look at what light has, you can see my highlights are pushed way down. Watch what happens here if I turn off my highlights. Okay, that definitely affected the sky. By moving my slider to the left, it's adding dark information to my highlights. Shadows. By turning off my shadows, we can see now they get really dark. Now I'm going to try to push that back a little ways. Okay, good. With white, again, I can push this white way over and see what it does. Can turn it off and see what it does. And we're going to try to find the sweet spot. So anything pushed to the left makes things darker. Anything pushed to the right makes them lighter. My black here sits in the middle. I do want my blacks to be a little stronger because I'd like to see that kind of punch of the image go back up. Okay, now exposure and contrast, I don't like playing with these much. Contrast can do some things very quickly, but it's kind of like a sledgehammer. It's a little hard to control, in my opinion. Effects. Dehaze is one that I like to play with quite a bit. You move it to over here towards the left, and it kind of removes a lot of the atmospheric value, and I move it to the right, and it makes things really kind of dark and bold. Okay, so I'm going to just adjust that over a little bit. Clarity is going to add some detail, right? And that's about all I like from this one. In my detail area, I'm going to come over to sharpening and sharpen the image a bit. Okay, so again, if I want to see what this is doing, I'm going to tap and hold. There's where we were. Here's where we are. A very different image now. Now I've done global changes, meaning it's affecting everything. Now what I want to show you how to do is come over and affect just certain parts of the image. And we're going to do that with selective. All right, so selective, when I tap on that, the plus button comes up in the upper left. I'm going to tap on the plus, tap on the brush. First thing I want to work on is bringing back some information in the tree trunk. Okay, so let's zoom in. Oops, let's go back. Okay, we'll add our brush. So wherever I tap, that anchor point is where my effects are going to start to take place. I am going to zoom in a little bit, and I can move this anchor point, and then I can begin to brush. Okay, and wherever I'm brushing is where my effects are going to take place. All right, and so I've brushed into the darkest areas. And I can add a little bit more. There is an eraser here as well. So if I come back, get the eraser, I can clean up what I've painted. All right, so let's now come down here to light. And this is where I can start to play with getting some information back into my shadow areas. Shadows and blacks. Okay, so that makes a huge difference in those two areas. To apply that, I press the check mark. Now down here in the bottom of the image, I would like to do another selective. So I'm going to get my brush, place that down on the bottom part of the image here, and I'm going to paint. Because my goal here is to maybe add a little contrast down in that area, and then I want to come back to effects and play with that dehaze and see what it does down in this reflection. Okay, add some clarity down here. And then again, come back to light, and I can play with I'm going to lower the contrast. I'm going to increase shadows and blacks down here so it's a little brighter in that bottom area, and see if I can get some information back in my whites and my highlights. Okay, so now when I press the before, wow, we're starting to get a really interesting image here. I really like the leading lines that are coming in from these reflections in the water, leading us to this tree trunk. And I love the range of value that's present. I do want to do one more thing with my selective brush, and that's to come over here into the white part of the tree trunk, right up here. And I'm going to see if I can add just a little bit of info in that area by playing with my highlights and shadows. Let's erase this up a little bit, clean it up. Cool. Now let's go back to light. And with highlights, I'm going to push that down to the left. Same with whites. Nice. Now instead of that being blown out, it's got some detail in there. That looks awesome. Okay, let's go back into selective. Tap on that, and I'm going to go into effects and add some clarity. And then detail and add some sharpness. Yeah, sweet. All right, so here's our after image, and here's our before.